And we are live streaming. Good afternoon or good evening for those of you on the East Coast. I want to welcome you to the last session of today. We are very fortunate to have Rick Ng. He's our VP of Membership, but he also helped to chair the Asia Conference.
Not membership, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Please don't give me another portfolio, Melanie. Thank you.
Communication has been a long day today.
Calm. Yes.
Because you have already a talented guy doing membership. So
I think I was looking at Ken's picture and then thinking of you or something.
Yeah, he's on board too. He's here.
Yes. All right. And so Rick is going to be talking about the Asia conference, which took place, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? And,
last week.
And you have some participants that will be joining us. So Rick, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Hope you had a real productive day attending some of these sessions. And just for the record too, there was a sort of a mix-up on the title. The title that was first published was called The Last Laugh, and that was actually the inaugural session that we had for this Asia conference. But I actually meant to address all the sessions, and there were 4 of them. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that, and that actually, Kian, can you go ahead and put up the first placeholder slide? Okay. Is Thomas on? You know what I'll do then after the introduction, I'll hand it over to the very first session that we'll address. But in any case, so the idea for the Asia conference for this year kind of came about because of what was going on with all of us in a world of the pandemic. Certainly being virtual in many instances provided opportunities. And I know how expensive these convenings can be if they were in person. We have to deal with accommodations and transportation and all incidental expenses. So I did kind of have an idea that maybe this was the time that we can reintroduce it and do it very frugally. And the best time to actually have it was doing it prior to the 56th National Convention. And so that's why it ended up taking place July 30th and 31st. So the theme that we chose was building connections in a changing world. I thought in a way that because there was somewhat of a long absence of an Asia conference, some of you may know if there were more recent ones, but the last one I was at and involved helping Winston was at the 2009 convention, the 50th one that was hosted by Greater San Gabriel Valley Lodge. And I don't recall there other being Asia conferences, but I knew there were numerous youth engagement activities. But again, the Asia conference was sort of touted, as the one main conference that brought Asian American, Pacific Islander.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, what was it? Oh. Hello?
Oh, go ahead, Rick, you're good.
Okay, I'm sorry, I heard something.
Yeah,
Okay.
Please mute if you're not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. So I thought that, again, there were many conditions that really made it possible to have one. And thankfully, the National Board provided their permission for me to go and pursue it. The idea was to really if it's something that will take place successfully in the future, and I certainly like to be involved in helping out, but I was thinking that a different chapter or lodge would take it, say, the next time. And the next time could actually be next year, because the Asia conferences were done annually, or it could be done sort of, again, in prelude of the National Convention. And what we were trying to do, too, is we were trying to actually get attendees to learn about the convention and, see if they would be interested in attending. And it gave a week's worth of opportunity to check out the different topics and the workshops and presentations that were under that umbrella to see if that's something that they would want to do. And in the future, maybe get more involved with the Alliance. So what I'm going to do now is we have today, fortunately, most of the moderators that actually help put together the sessions. And what they're going to do is they're going to kind of give you a bit of a review and point up on some highlights of what was in the discussions in each of the sessions that took place. Now, we did it in a 2-day format, and maybe lessons learned. I might not do that again because I think I thought it was sort of like providing some time to like have a reception in the evening that usually sort of like introduces an event like this. So that's why we had the one inaugural session that was on addressing comedy in sort of a backlash culture, and then we'd follow the other remaining 3 in the next day. And so we'll follow the same format. And I want to introduce one of our interns for this summer. His name is Jackie Nee. And Jackie is a student that is bound for Columbia University in several weeks. So he was very engaged, as well as the 2 other interns that we had in helping to put together the conference. And let me just, before I hand it to Jackie, let me just say I'd like to thank very much Wen Lee, Jen, Ryan Hopkins, Ruj Ajaya, Jackie Nee, Ryan Wang, and Justin Tran. They were the core folks that helped put that worked on the logistics and mechanics that helped put the conference last week. So Jackie, do you want to take over and talk about the highlights regarding the first session?
Yeah, I'll do that right now. Let me share my screen. Oh, Rick, can you stop sharing so I can share?
Okay, let's see. Did that work? Okay.
Yeah, that works. Okay, everyone, this is the summary and the highlight reel for the last laugh, how to be funny in backlash culture. So this was the first session we had for the Asia conference, and we had a bunch of panelists. I don't have all the names on hand, but I think Rick has them. You can post in the chat. But yeah, let's dive into it. So the first one I really want to highlight is a moment where one of the panelists said that if your personality is bigger than your race, you do not experience racism. This is the clip.
He said if your personality was bigger than your race, you did not experience racism. And he has a very he's a very big racism. He has a very big personality. And I also have a very big personality as well. And so I think I was pretty oblivious because I just sort of navigated the waters. I'm from Fairfield, Ohio, 25 minutes outside of Cincinnati.
So basically, I think this moment really connected with me personally, because I've actually shared this experience a little bit. I think I escaped a lot of racism, microaggressions throughout my school years because I was always getting in trouble. I was yelling random stuff in class and pulling pranks. And so, when people hated me, it wasn't because, my skin color was yellow. It was because I was me. But I think experiences that this panelist talks about and mine kind of skews our views on racism and systemic, oppression. Just because we made it and went through the system without issue doesn't mean that there aren't issues at hand, right? It's kind of like people saying President Obama was president, therefore racism is gone. So, I think this moment really highlights that while personal experiences are definitely important, they definitely don't represent everyone else's experiences. So that was the first clip. The second clip,
if your personality,
let me move, is the model minority myth. And here's the clip.
if I can be real, I think it's fear. I think that people are afraid to make fun of Black people and Latino people because they might get assaulted. Whereas like Asian people, they're the model minority. What are they going to do? They're docile and whatever, and they're doing math and they can't do anything. So I think it's that. I really think that it's become a thing where it's like, unless you can back it up with sort of a physical threat.
So basically what the panelist is talking about here is that why are there so many jokes about Asian people, right? Like, why isn't there as many jokes about, Black people, Hispanic people, people of other races? Why are Asians usually at the butt of the joke? And what he's saying here is that because we can't back it up with, a threat of violence, which in my opinion is not ideal, because while the myth of the model minority is definitely fake, its existence in people's minds is still really real. Like, people genuinely think that that Asian people are, kind of submissive, don't really like to engage in these battles, as the presenter says. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. This is definitely a problem to think about moving forward. So what do we do about this? Do we highlight the criminals that also exist in the Asian community? I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily the move. I think one possible route is just have more Asian comedians, more writers, stuff like that. But yeah, this is definitely something to think about, and was pretty important to me at the conference.
If I can be real.
And then here are the next two clips. And so the theme of these two clips is it's funnier. So like the question that these two clips are trying to answer is, how can you be funny without being offensive? And basically what one of the panelists says is that if the thing is funnier than it is offensive, that's okay. So here's the first clip.
It's really funny. Like if it's funnier than it is offensive. Like I posted a couple of weeks ago after a Black girl won the spelling bee. I go, Black girl wins spelling bee. Pressure mounts on Indians as slam dunk contest approaches. And then I posted, is this racist or funny? And the number of Black people comment is like, dude, that's some funny shit, bro. It's like, because it is racist, but it's kind of funny, right?
Oh, sorry. Let me head back. So I'm gonna be honest. I don't know how this answer the panelist gives really helps, because he kind of backs up his statement about his seemingly racist joke by saying that a lot of people from the group he was making a joke about found it funny. But to be fair, these comments come from people who follow him, right? So they already kind of have a bias of liking the dude. And so, if they're giving it an okay, it doesn't mean, the general public is also giving it an okay. And so, I don't have a better answer to say, how do we be funny and not be offensive? But I don't think his answer right here does it necessarily for me. Let me move on to the second clip.
I don't know. I think if he did it accurately, like Russell Peters can get away with it doing the Chinese accent because he studied it. He had been immersed in it. So he's kind of got the inside scoop, on Asian culture. So I think that kind of makes a difference where there's an effort being made to understand that culture rather than, taking secondhand stereotypes and being lazy about it. So I think
so what the second clip here is basically saying is that one, really, I think you guys all know who Russell Peters is, but if you guys don't know, he's a pretty big comedian. He makes a lot of jokes about Asian people that some people would take as racist, and he usually gets away with it. And his explanation here is that because the man is so well versed with the culture, the Asian culture and stuff like that, he's able to make these jokes. But I'd argue that I don't know. It just, no matter how long I stay in, for example, Mexico, I'll never be able to face the same struggles like someone who is actually Mexican is. No matter how well versed I am in the culture, because I wasn't born Mexican, I wasn't born Hispanic, and so I just think it's a really slippery slope. And I do get his point a little bit, but ultimately, I don't know if this is the best way forward as well. So this is the fourth clip, which is about punching up. And basically it's going to cover the topic of, can we make jokes about white people?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I don't think cancel culture is a thing. I feel like people think it is, and they really blow it out as a thing.
Oh, wait, no, sorry. I skipped it. Here it is.
Supremacy. At the end of the day, whatever the fucking pyramid is, white people are at the top of it, so it's always punching up, in my opinion. And I am dating a white man, and I constantly say white things to I'm like, white people are gross, and I stand by.
So what the clip is basically talking about, as I mentioned earlier, is that can you make jokes about white people? And what the panel is saying is you can, because in a way it's kind of punching up, right? White people have been in control of all these legislative systems, monetary systems, and so because of that, you can make jokes about them. I think this is a fair game take because, eventually I do hope to live in a world where everyone can bash equally on each other, right, and make jokes about each other. But when you live in a country where historically, since its founding, there's only been 11, like 11 African American senators, like ever. I think making jokes about white people is not the worst thing in the world. Here's the last clip.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I don't think cancel culture is a thing. Like, I feel like people think it is and they really blow it out as a thing. But you trending on Twitter for one day does not mean you're canceled. Those people go on and go start doing shows 2 weeks from then, 3 weeks from then. Some of those people don't even have any impact. If they're not checking their Twitter, they're not even canceled.
Yeah, I mean, she isn't wrong here. I think people really blow out the idea of cancel culture a little bit and try to make this huge culture war. But really, it's just a way of holding people accountable, right? Like, sure, there are some instances where cancel culture can go a little bit far and, straight up ruin someone's career. But I think if your career is ruined by a few people tweeting on Twitter, you either didn't have a big career to start with, or whatever you did was really, really bad. And so you kind of deserve it. And yeah, these few clips are the summary of what occurred at the last laugh session. And I'll give it back to Rick.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, I'm sorry. We had another slide that did have the names of the comedians, and I can just identify them for you right now. So our moderator, who was unable to be here today, her name is Claudia Choi. She's an actress, writer, and sometime comic, and also has a very interesting story. We started to collaborate on something of this because she also, I met her through my work with LA versus Hate because she too was a victim. There was a case that took place in Leisure World in Seal Beach. Her parents had lived there for a long time, and earlier this year, her father had passed away. And shortly before the memorial service, she received an anonymous letter in the U.S. mail that basically said that they were glad that her father was dead, that the Asians shouldn't be living in Orange County. They don't want them. So we kind of started a conversation out about whether or not, is it something that we can laugh at? I mean, the absurdity of it, telling, an entire race to, just vacate their home, for many of them that were born there. It just seems so ludicrous. And, it came into a discussion about what really is funny today, or what really can be funny. Certainly, maybe some of the things that were permissible in the past certainly doesn't have a past now. One of the other things that we didn't really touch upon was that you have a lot of comedians, well-known comedians, who really are passing up on performing in the college campuses because they felt that they become a very difficult audience. They would try some of the humor that may be crass, maybe denigrating, but someone would shout out like, "Hey, that's not funny, man! You're hurting someone's feelings." So of course, it kind of destroys the mood. But again, it's a. I thought it was a provocative topic to sort of like introduce, to sort of appeal to an audience that we might have had that was far more ranging than some of the other topics that were probably more targeted and more driven by the youth that were working on it. So I like to give a heads up to the comedians. Vida Iyer was the woman, and then Rajiv Satyal, who spoke quite frequently and elegantly. And the other two were Eric Vu, and there was one gentleman named Julius Wu, very quiet, but probably very accomplished. He was a director of several episodes for The Family Guy, which is a sort of, I would say, raunchy kind of adult humor cartoon. But he did mention about that, there were even things that he wouldn't touch. And had a hard time doing it, but he said that I guess the managers of the show, I guess the show producers were very respectful. Said, if you don't want to do it, if you don't want us to do it, then we respect that. So A good job, Jackie. And again, I forgot to mention too that at the end of this, we'll put the links to the YouTube so you can watch a replay of day 1 and day 2. So now we finished with day 1. We decided to have sort of like a reception, but I think people are more interested in going logging off. But the next day we started very early. And Wen Lee led us in a great wake up icebreaker game. And I think it got everybody engaged. It probably made them less mad at me for making them get up early. And after we had a bit of fun, we jumped into the next topic. And I don't know, is Thomas here now or is he still not being able to?
I'm here, Rick.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Thomas. Hey, sorry about that. So the next one that we had was had to do something that is very much on our minds all the time is, the seat at the table, they always say. I think I first learned the comment from Judy Chu that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so we talked, we had Thomas address the issue of the AAPI Trailblazers, the first perhaps in the city that they were in or whoever they represented or themselves in their families to take on political leadership, particularly in this very tense climate of ours. So Thomas had a great discussion. He can identify who the panelists were. So thanks again, Thomas, for being here. I'll give it to you.
Sure. Just a quick rundown, and thank you to CACA and Rick and the team for helping to host the event and the conference for our students. Had a good turnout for Saturday morning early, and hopefully educational for those that participated. We had Sam Shin, who's on the school board at the Worthington School District outside of Columbus, Ohio, or in Columbus, Ohio. Jennifer Chao, who used to be in LA, used to run the OCA Greater LA chapter, but a few years ago moved to Arizona and now runs Arizona ANHPI Advocates and does a lot of organizing work among the Asian American community out in Arizona, which is sorely needed. And Jocelyn Young, I think youngest woman of color mayor in the history of California, still mayor of Eastvale, California, here outside of kind of Los Angeles and the Inland Empire. And so had a great discussion highlighting especially kind of younger next generation leadership as well in the Asian American and Chinese American space, and hearing from them, their perspectives on the rise in Asian American anti-Asian sentiments and hate incidents and hate crimes. And addressing that in their communities over the last few months and year, especially with the COVID and the rise of these sentiments, given some political rhetoric and sentiments that were supported and pushed out of the top echelons of our leadership and in government. But also talked about their personal stories, how what interested them and what pushed them to get involved in politics and in the community and in government. And the need for more Asian American and Pacific Islander representation, both in government, but also in media and in the general kind of representation in those spaces. So they were able to share, and they shared a little of their experience there and called for the need for more representation. And I think highlighting the fact that if there is a silver lining to any of the rise in hate crimes and anti-Asian kind of incidents over the last year, it's been that there's been greater appreciation and attention paid by those in decision-making kind of positions in government and in the nonprofit and the philanthropic sectors and in the corporate space to make sure that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are included in these conversations at the table. Kind of ended, I'll talk about data aggregation and the model minority myth and busting that for the Asian American community, income disparities within kind of the Asian American sub-ethnic groups, and then ended kind of with a call to make sure that students and all Asian Americans, like many of you here that are already involved with CACA and through CACA, to get involved, especially among our youth, to make sure that we're looking for opportunities to understand our own history and our own experience as Asian Americans better, and to take up the mantle for when we see things that are wrong and see things that need to be improved and need to be made better and justice kind of made whole in our communities, to take action, to take it upon ourselves to get engaged with our communities, to engage with community groups like CACA and others that are doing the work to make sure that there is better representation, but also to work to ensure justice and equity and inclusion, and that diversity is a value that we all live out in our communities. And so appreciate the opportunity to have that conversation with students and ahead of kind of this convention, and hopefully and looking forward to continued conversations and community building and efforts to continue to empower our community and those in leadership, including in the political and the government space in the years to come. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Thomas. And I just want to also just point out that the reason we don't have any clips to show is because there was a particular issue that was brought up, and it may have been problematic in terms of the content that was discussed by somebody, that we decided that, to be respectful, that we wouldn't show at all until we got the clearance. And so I just wanted to just point that out, that we didn't have any clips to show. But as Thomas pointed out, and some of the folks that were on the panel, Jocelyn Yao, I'd like to point out, who was one of our very first CAC Los Angeles Summer Associates Internship Program. And we also like to tout her as being like a good example of like what can happen, if you orchestrate an internship program, giving them opportunities to engage in their communities through CACA. Jocelyn went on to work in the congressional level, and East Vale is a very small but up-and-coming city in the Riverside County area. And she made history by being the youngest and the first female of color to be elected. And she's currently serving as the mayor. The other one I wanted to point out too was Jen Chao. She, if many of you might know, she was the former ED of OCA Greater Los Angeles. She was my predecessor when I took over as interim for a while. But the only reason I want to bring up Jennifer is that, she's in Arizona right now. She moved there for family reasons, but she's been very engaged. Obviously in the states of Arizona and Georgia, there have been some pretty intense challenges that had taken place in terms of the voting laws that each state has. So Jennifer has been really active in registration for getting people to sign up to vote. And I also want to point out too, is that our very own Jackie Nee, the kid's only about 18 years old, and he has a super PAC, and he was in Georgia just a couple of weeks back, helping the New Georgia Project in the efforts to sort of like, I think, overturn those restrictive laws. So we're surrounded by a lot of activism, and I'm sure in the many chapters that are represented here today, there's also the student or the young person out there that certainly could use one's help. And I think CACA is in position to do it. So thanks again, Thomas. And let's move on to the next session that we had. And it was, again, something that I think that the youth need to start paying attention to. I'm guilty of that when I was younger. It's about my own healthcare, and it's so critical today, especially as I age fast. And I'm certainly thinking that with the pandemic and with the cost of healthcare going up, that is something that the young people need to focus on. So our very own Ray Gia, who herself is a medical student, she brought together a collection of medical professionals, and I'll let you take it away, Ray.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, my name is Ray Tinja. I'm a member of the LA Lodge, and I joined around the beginning of this year. And so I asked Rick if I could kind of help organize one of the panels for the Asia conference, and I chose to do it on the health disparities in the API community. And I chose this topic in particular because of what I learned from my experience in college at UCLA, and the fact that I come from like a really white dominated suburban town on the East Coast. So when I was back at home, I was largely unaware of what barriers APIs faced because of the lack of education and curriculum in my school, and also because of the lack of the Asian community in general. So when I came to UCLA, I joined a pre-med volunteer org called Asian Pacific Health Corps. That's actually how I got to meet Rick and the rest of CACA. And it gave me a lot of firsthand insight of API health disparities. Hi, Rose. Sorry. I joined Asian Pacific Health Corps, and it gave me a lot of firsthand insight of API health disparities at the free health fairs that we host around the LA community. And I got to witness firsthand a lot of language barriers between patients and physicians. I saw statistics of cardiovascular disease and cancer and how it disproportionately affects APIs because of socioeconomic factors, the traditional diets of the Asian community, and also a hesitance to talk to physicians in general. And most of all, I saw how negatively the model minority myth affected the service recipients that I talked to. So I decided to host this panel so that the youth participants at the Asia conference who are interested in a career in medicine and healthcare would be able to gain some insight from experts on how they can kind of better understand the population that they serve. So these panelists included Diane Zhao. She's an incoming first-year student at Yale who graduated from UCLA last year. Dr. Andrew Lehman, who is a pediatric GI fellow at Stanford. Dr. Matthew Ting, he teaches long-term care and he trains senior living management personnel at Cal State. And he also serves on quite a few medical school faculties as well. There was also Dr. Arthur Chen. He's a practicing family physician and also advocate for health equity and Medicare for all movements. And last but not least, Dr. Susan Wu. She was a pediatric hospitalist and advocacy program director and also medical director for quality and clinical effectiveness. So these panelists all gave really great insight and perspectives from their experiences on how being a part of the API community has guided them throughout their careers and is helping them to shape their future goals. So I'll share a few clips from the recording. Let me share my screen really quick. So first up, I like to share this quote from Diane, who is a first-generation immigrant from China, and she became really passionate about serving the API community through her experience in the same club as me, actually, despite not knowing what exactly she wanted to do in the medical field. But she began really thinking about wanting to be a caregiver and just someone who can help others. So I'll share a few minutes from what she said. I'm sorry, I think I forgot to share audio. Okay.
Youngest here. So in undergrad, which I just graduated a year ago, I think one of the biggest things that shaped my future goals is actually a club that I'm in with Ray called Asian Pacific Health Corps. I joined during my first year because I am actually a first generation immigrant myself. I'm not sure what to call myself because I moved here when I was like around 10 years old. But basically, I really wanted to use my firsthand experience and my bilingual skills to do something in the community. And so I joined this club that organizes free health fairs for the underserved Asian Pacific Islander community. And I realized that's, something I'm really passionate about and want to continue doing. At the time, I don't think I knew for sure that I want to go into medicine yet, but I knew I wanted to be involved in the medical field. And it was through, I think, my research and mentorship activities outside of that club that made me realize, oh, I really want a career in which I can kind of combine all of these interests together. And I felt like medicine, going on to med school and then going into a career as a physician is really an opportunity for me to be everything that I want to be, a community worker, a leader in medicine, and a caregiver to patients. So I think, all three activities like volunteering, research, and mentorship together is what led me down this path.
And then next, I'll share a clip from Dr. Lehman. He also became interested in public health through his experiences in quality improvement, and he spoke on his want to improve the quality of patient care on a bigger scale.
In terms of how I decided on medicine, it was actually when I took 2 years off between college and med school. I actually did a little bit of quality improvement work myself. It was just very superficial, basic stuff. But for those of you that don't know quality improvement, the way that I think about it, I kind of think about it as like public health on an institution level. Every hospital kind of practices a little bit differently from each other. They have different kind of patients that they serve. They have different challenges, different strengths, and so all that creates a very unique environment for each hospital. And basically quality improvement is like changing the way that that system operates in order to like maximize or optimize the quality of patient care that you're giving on a bigger scale. And so the reason that was so exciting for me is because it helped me to realize that physicians can do a wide array of things that go outside of the span of the patient's bedside. And it's really interesting because all of this kind of focuses on the patient and ultimately impacts the patient, but you get to have a wide range of effects outside of that, whether it's quality improvement, advocacy, and going into politics. If you're interested in technology, there's a niche for that too, medical education, and the list goes on. There's so many different things that you can be passionate about outside of medicine that you can combine into a career.
And then next, I would like to share a clip from Dr. Matthew Ting. He shares stories about how he's personally witnessed political figures making racist remarks towards the API community, especially his friend who became professionally and mentally destroyed by racial discrimination, as he quotes, which has led him to become more involved in political matters.
Decided to leave Pasadena from Huntington Memorial Hospital to go to one of the southern states to become geriatric chief of one of the university hospitals. And so after less than 2 years, I advised him because of the kind of the cultural differences back then. We're talking about 20 years ago. So and also I stand 6 feet tall and I'm 180 pounds. Not like that's needed information, but I command some recognition. Okay, and he's much shorter, even though we've been friends for many times, many years. So I told him not to go, but he decided to take on the job. So he's being ridiculed in his face on a daily basis. I'm not exaggerating, telling him to go back to your country, you don't belong here, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, and that was like about 20 years ago. So it was so severe that he had a total nervous breakdown. And to this point, in the last 20 years or so, he's very much being an MD and also being a total invalid in a sense. And he's on Social Security disability. He cannot function, even though, I mean, he looks just fine. But, there are triggering points. That's why, we all kind of know what Simone Biles is going through right now. And sometimes this mental health is not that visible. It's not like, you're physically falling apart. I mean, she said physically she's fine. She's on top of it. But mentally, she's just I just saw the word this morning. I would say just kind of, she cannot tell like up from down, that kind of stuff. So my friend, Thomas, that's his name. It's just like he's totally destroyed professionally and also mentally by racial discrimination against Asians. So, this Stop Asian Hate is not, I mean, I feel more kind of around me in close proximity much more so than ever before. So this is something that's not like, it's kind of, it's tough, I would say. It's not something you can pinpoint to a cause or whatever. And that's how you like interact with people, and how they interact with you before versus how they're interacting with you now.
And then next, I would like to share the quote from Dr. Arthur Chen. He wanted to be a strong advocate for the immigrant community by influencing public policy. And from what he has witnessed during the Trump administration, he wanted to make it less difficult for immigrants to get healthcare and access to food programs like food stamps, and to help disadvantaged populations. And here's him speaking on his opinions on API disparities.
Sure, which one is true? So language barriers and cultural barriers became the focus of how I could channel the anger in a constructive way, to say that regardless of your ability to speak English, because we're such a multicultural society, a land of immigrants, then why is it that we have to, as a non-English or a limited English proficiency patient, has to go through a system where they're just so intimidated and fearful because of not having access to interpreters and things like that. And this is what we were having concrete experiences with. So I was able to channel it into all the battles that we had on the legal battles of trying to make sure that laws were passed and that regulations were actually enforced and implemented so that people would have language access, so that now, that you could go to, a facility or a health plan or whatever, and you receive something in all these different languages.
And then last but not least, Dr. Susan Wu, she wanted to use her position as a leader in the healthcare system to dismantle existing structures that result in unequal treatment and outcomes for patients, especially for disenfranchised communities within the Asian American umbrella. So let me go to that really quick.
Challenges of immigrant communities are, I think part of what we can do to advocate for the API patients and families. The other thing, though, that I've also learned, I think as those of us that are attendings now, I think we're privileged to be in leadership positions, and I've learned a lot about structural competency, right, recently. I know there's the structural competency working group out of Oakland has been amazing in doing this training. And if you haven't gone to one of their trainings, I would encourage you to. But that's really made me think about how, as a leader in a healthcare system, can we then start to, as Art said, dismantle what are those policies, procedures, structures that result in unequal treatment and unequal outcomes for our patients, and what we can do when we're in a role, in a position of power where we can make some of those changes. I think all of us, and even as residents and as medical students, are in a privileged position and can do some of that. I think that's also makes you really have to think of who are all the disenfranchised communities. And as Asian Americans, we've got to think, amongst ourselves, right? Who are those communities within that Asian American umbrella, which is huge, right? I think I had mentioned that the challenges of our families in Guam and in the territories and in the COFA regions. It's if you know how the healthcare access and the health status of patients in those communities. I mean, there's such a huge difference, and people don't always see that, and we have to advocate for disaggregating and the data, and to understand, all the different communities within that Asian American umbrella, how we can help them and lift them up and provide what they need, what they need to be able to achieve the equal health outcomes.
Yeah, and at the end of the session during the Asia conference, I closed out by prompting the panelists and participants to continue thinking and having these conversations about health disparities that exist in our community and beyond, to family, friends, and continue to have stimulating conversations and learn from each other. So I can provide the link to this full live stream on YouTube of this panel session. And also I'd like to thank CACA for giving me the opportunity in the Asia conference to host this panel discussion. Yeah, I'll turn it back to you, Rick.
Thank you very much, Ray. Yes, I found actually speaking to each of the ones that I was able to speak to and hearing the things that have driven them to take on that extra step of advocacy in what they wanted to learn as a profession, and how they were able, how they met, they shared their experiences, like, Diana, and her, when she was talking to me about when she was bullied as a young person, and how that sort of like gave her that sort of empathy, that medical professionals, probably it's part of their career. Andrew, same thing. I mean, his passion, compassion and passion for children, which led him to pediatrics, which I thought was very interesting, that you had 3 of the 5 that were actually in some related pediatrics fields. So, but thank you again for leading that session. So we go on to our final one that had closed the day. It was what really the Asia conference was about. I mean, it was trying to put into context some of the new idioms and language, cisgender, intersectionality, critical race theory, non-binary. I mean, I talk to a lot of young people, and I'm just asking them, you got to explain to me about this stuff, because if it is an important in the conversation going forward, we should know about that, and how it sort of like is driving or impacting youth activism. So our final session focused on, I like the fact that it was kind of called, this is not your parents' activism, and this is sort of like the new activism in a sense for the younger people, and particularly the age of the pandemic. And so leading that discussion is a blogger, writer, artist, activist named Quan, and she's based in San Francisco. And just to let you, CACA San Francisco Lodge know, her parents, or her father's side, have been longtime members of the San Francisco Lodge. So this is a good way to kind of pull her in. But anyway, so Katie will talk about the session that she moderated, and the panelists who were quite, saw themselves remarkable activists working in the Bay City. So Katie?
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. And then just to add on to what Rick said, my grandparents actually got married at CACA, and I just found that out. So it comes full circle, if anything. But yeah, again, thank you for having me. I've been really fortunate to be able to work in Asian American studies as an educator, and then also be able to moderate this amazing panel, or filled with panelists who are actually doing so much of the work on the ground. And so I will admit that I don't have any clips, and I don't have any thing to show on the screen. So I'm just looking at all the wonderful faces that are here on my own screen, or also the black boxes, but it's okay. I work in the classroom, so most people turn off their cameras anyways. So if I improvise, you'll know why. But so I got to talk to 3 amazing Asian women, Joanna Lam, Adriana Zhang, and Era Kian. And they all range from the ages of 17 to 30 years old. They're all students at different stages of their lives. 2 of them are high school students, and then the Era is a city college student. And so she's been there. Actually, she was in my first class when I was teaching a few years back. And so it's been amazing to see her really bloom into a leader on her own. But some of the themes that really kind of came out, both from the high school level and to a college level, is just access. They were saying that while students have a lot of access to certain resources, sometimes depending on what it is, it could be like homework help, it could be, mainly homework help, but then also just ways to succeed professionally. However, they find themselves struggling in terms of having access to more professional development. They wanted to learn about finances. They wanted to learn about child's rights. They wanted to learn about internet safety. And then on the college level, this is during the time that city colleges are constantly being underfunded and undervalued. And so at City, where I work actually, 200 classes were being cut. And so this means students lose their classes, they're not able to graduate. A lot of faculty have lost their jobs. And in the midst of all of this, the administrators were starting to get raises. And so a lot of the priorities were a little bit off, and it was really up to the students who felt the need to speak up and speak out. And so for Joanna, she started her own nonprofit organization at 17 years old called Storm SF, and she works with other high school students to pretty much give other people access to having food resources, being able to figure out how to give mental health resources as well, talking about free muni and having free public transportation, and really giving people the resources that they need in order to succeed living in San Francisco. And here in SF, as liberal as we are, it's still extremely expensive, and a lot of people aren't able to get the help that they need. And so one of Joanna's things is that she wants to make sure that it's easy to figure out on the web. So she's made sure to make it easily usable for everyone, no matter the age. And so she's also included different origin stories where people can talk about their own, stories and how these resources have helped them in their daily lives. And so she has also she's starting to work with the Board of Education in San Francisco, where she's going to represent the thousands of students here. And she had said, during the pandemic, that she wished that she could do something about it. And after attending a whole bunch of these different meetings, it just occurred to her that she said, well, I could do something about it. And so she decided to run for youth delegate and representing all these other students. So that's been amazing. And so one of the key takeaways that she's had is to take risks. And she cited a Cambodian proverb that says, you can't claim heaven as your own if you're going to sit under it, essentially stating that you have to do something if you want to have the success that you want other people to have as well. And then you have Adriana Zhang, who is also a high school senior, and she founded SF Change. And so she's been able to work with city government and basically go into different classes and give workshops to other students. And then they talk about all the things that they wish that they had learned in school, talking about personal finance and the rights that you have as someone who's under 18 years old, how do you stay safe, and then college preparedness. She works with other students to give these workshops so that they can have the maximum potential within the city as well. And so this year they're expanding nationally, which is very exciting. And in her free time, she is part of the Youth Commission for District 7. And so she works a lot on youth rights, making sure that housing is accessible for younger people, and then making sure that public transportation is free. So that just got passed. And she says that although the voting measure for ages 16 and 17 did not go through, that they're going to try again, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that that'll happen. In the meantime, she also does monthly podcasts as updates and is working to create anti-API hate crime resolutions with people in government. And then lastly is Era Kian. She is 30 years old. And at the time I had said, don't trust anyone over 30. And it just happened that she turned 30 like a few days ago. So she's young at heart, if anything. But she has really stepped up to the plate. I've known her for a few years now. And when she came into my classroom, she was very, very shy. And it has flipped like a 180 since then. She's formed a group called CCSF Collective, and it has worked as one of the, I'd say, has worked to make herself known within that community, and is not afraid of speaking up anymore. She has really created a whole bunch of different kinds of resources for City College students during the pandemic. They've tried to work with City College to create a food bank in that space. They include being able to provide other resources, whether it be food or technology help to people who need it. They've also organized and made sure that the classes that are being cut are at least publicized. And so there were a lot of classes like ESL, Women and Gender Studies, Cantonese that were on the chopping block. And so she worked to pretty much get it publicized and make sure that everyone knew that these kinds of classes, during Stop AAPI Hate and Black Lives Matter, for example, that this was violence against our own communities. When you do cut those classes off, or if you are underfunding them, then that is violence against our own communities. She's worked to I'd say unite Asian American and Black organizations within the city, within City College as well, and has included making zines, doing art shows, and creating a 10-point program where communities were able to have their input and really create this very strong, not only 10-point program, but also list of demands. And so I think in the way that she stated it, the other two who are high school students have been working within the system. And for her, she's been saying, we are self-determined, we can do our own action, and we don't need to ask for permission. I think that one probably comes a little bit more with age. She's been able to really, with a lot of direct action, cause a bit of trouble with the Board of Trustees, and trouble can be seen on both sides. And so as a City College teacher, I'd say that for me, at least, it's a good thing because that there are a lot of people who are able to keep their jobs or have compensation for when they do lose their jobs. But in total, they're working a lot to create additional classes for students and have certificates. Right now, they're creating a Build Abolition 101 course that will be accessible online and really work with the community to have different leaders come into the classroom and tell students about their work. And it will be accessible online, as I said, and recorded. But yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much. Yeah, certainly one of the things that we're always trying to do is to make contact with these young activists because there are certain things that I think some of the older seasoned organizations can offer, and we certainly would like to learn from them as well. Someone once asked me what it is about CACA that has kept me involved. And I thought about the question and I said, you know what, for me, is if I go to our lodge and I see like 3 generations of members sitting and talking to each other and communicating as peers, I think that's great. I think that's sort of familial or, you know, sort of ambience with a purpose is what really makes it sustainable and makes it attractive for people to continue. So, so going forward with this particular format, we have a platform. We also have other great brands that we can certainly utilize going forward. And maybe in this sort of like hybrid world that we're finding ourselves in existence, this might be the ideal platform to have these kinds of events. And I hope that that the Alliance and also the many chapters around the country may think about doing this. And if we go forward and we decide that maybe the format is to have a BNL Asia conference to be in conjunction with wherever the convention is, then I think that's a great thing. We can build up again our membership, which we all are striving to do. You know, it's not an easy thing. You wish there was a panacea that could just like top 40 people in your, you know, your organization and get going from there. But as you all know, it's very laborious, but at the same time, very rewarding. So thanks again to all of you. Thanks to the moderators who are here, the speakers, to talk about the main topic about the Asia conference. So Lonnie, if you don't mind, can you put up the link that has the YouTube for the recordings? And we can make that also available. So, you know, at any time at your leisure, you can go and listen to the panelists. And sometimes, you know, when you hear a review and then you listen to something, it, you know, does kind of like really add a bit of dimension to it. Like, oh, okay, and now I know what that means. So I know it's almost 1:45, and I don't want to take up any more time, particularly those of our friends on the East Coast. So I'd like to say thank you again for this opportunity to put the conference or help put the conference together. And I thank the team again, Wenli, Ryan, Ray, Jackie, Ryan, and Justin. And so I know that if you have a question, anything to ask us about it, just go ahead and email me. You know, and the last few remaining days that I am VP of Communications, and I'll try to best answer your questions as possible. So I'll turn it back over to you, Melanie.
Thank you, Rick, for, you know, it was a great conference. I had the opportunity to speak at the conference briefly, and you know, it's great to see, you know, all the young folks getting involved in the issues today. And thank you so much for you and your team for putting it together. So so tomorrow, please join us back at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We'll be focusing on education, and we will be ending the day with our traditional Spirit America Awards. So please join us tomorrow and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you, everybody.